I used to think life was simple, that a man only needed a little to feel whole. A quiet place to sleep, work that kept his hands busy, and a woman who pulled him back into warmth after a long day. And for a long time, I believed I had all of that. I held on to it the way a tired man holds onto the last light in a dark tunnel. Her name was Isla, the girl whose laughter always sounded like it came from a world kinder than mine. She had this softness in her eyes that made me believe I was enough, even when the world made me feel small. And maybe that was where everything began, not with her lies, but with my faith in them. Back then, I was nothing extraordinary, just a mechanic with grease under my nails, a back that ached more days than not, and dreams I kept tucked away because life didn't give men like me much room to chase anything. But every time she touched my shoulder or said, "We'll get there," something inside me stayed alive. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was a story I told myself. Maybe both. My days were the same. Sunrise, work, sweat, the smell of metal, the quiet satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. Funny, I never realized how easily a man can fix machines while failing to notice the cracks forming in his own home. At first, the changes were small. Whisper small, too soft to confront, too sharp to ignore. She stopped asking if I'd eaten, stopped meeting me at the door the way she used to. Her phone became a wall between us, lit up with conversations I wasn't a part of. She smiled less, and when she did, it felt practiced, like something she put on the same way she put on lipstick for show. Late at night, I would lie still and hear her sigh. Not the tired kind, the disappointed kind, the kind that makes a man question his worth without her ever saying a word. And the truth? I felt it. I felt her slipping away long before she ever admitted it to herself. Men like me, we don't love lightly. We choose once. We hold on, even when it hurts, even when it's breaking us. Maybe that's why I ignored the signs. Not because I was blind, but because I was terrified of losing the one thing that made my hard life feel meaningful. The first real crack happened one quiet evening. I was fixing a chair, something simple, something solid, and she asked me, "Do you ever wish your life was different?" I told her my life was already different, because it had her. She didn't smile. She just turned her face away, and in that moment, something in her eyes changed. I didn't know it then, but I'd already lost parts of her I never realized she was given to someone else. And when she whispered later that night, "Love is beautiful, but it doesn't pay bills," something inside me shattered quietly. That was the moment the man I was began to break, and the man I would become began to rise. I should have seen it. Anyone else would have. But when you love someone with your whole chest, you don't look for the places where they've stopped loving you back. You build excuses. You patch the holes. You convince yourself that loyalty means absorbing the sharp edges they won't admit they're throwing at you. And that's exactly what I did. For months, something in her energy shifted. Not enough to accuse her, but enough to make my heartbeat feel heavier. It was like living beside a familiar song played with one wrong note. You tell yourself the tune is still beautiful, so you ignore the part that hurts your ear. You pretend it'll fix itself if you just keep humming along. She stopped meeting my eyes when she spoke. Her voice still said, "I'm fine," but her body stepped away from me a little more each day. Her phone, the same phone she used to leave on the table without a second thought, suddenly became something she guarded like a secret life support machine. She would laugh at messages she never showed me. And when I'd ask what made her smile, she'd say, "Nothing, just something silly." And somehow, I swallowed that answer too. Every time I tried to understand what was happening, she would tilt her head and say, "You're overthinking again." And I believed her, because believing her felt easier than facing the possibility that the woman who once clung to me was now slipping away, willingly. My family noticed before I did, and that should have been the first warning. My mother would touch my shoulder gently and ask, "Beta, is everything okay between you two?" I'd force a smile, the kind that hides pain, and say, "Yes, she's just stressed. She has a lot going on." But stress doesn't make a woman hide her happiness from you. Stress doesn't make her glow when someone else's name lights up her screen. Stress doesn't make her turn quiet when you walk into the room. The kind of quiet that feels like guilt dressed as silence. The signs were all there. The late-night work calls. The new clothes she claimed were cheap. The transformation from casual to glamorous just to run errands. The sudden distance that wasn't created by arguments, but by indifference. Even the silence between us changed. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of two people who understood each other. It was the kind that held too many unspoken truths, too many secrets, too much pretending. But I ignored it. Not because I was naive, but because I was terrified. Terrified of confronting a reality that could break me. Terrified of losing her, even though, in a way, I already had. I thought holding on tighter meant fighting for love. I didn't know that sometimes holding on just means you're dragging your own heart across broken glass. Chapter 2 wasn't about betrayal. It was about the blindness I chose. The kind that feels safer than the truth. Right up until the truth destroys you anyway. The truth hit me like a storm I never saw coming. It didn't sneak in softly. It didn't arrive as a crack or a whisper. It crashed, thunderous and undeniable, shattering the quiet life I thought I had built. I came home that Friday evening, early, heart light with the hope of surprising her. The city outside was fading into dusk, a soft hum of tires and engines in the distance. I pushed the door open, expecting the familiar warmth of home, and froze. She wasn't alone. There he was, the man I had joked with, trusted, shared secrets with. And there she was, Isla, my Isla, smiling at him in a way I had thought belonged only to me, glowing, leaning close, whispering words that weren't meant for me, words that cut deeper than any blade. Time slowed. Every second stretched like it had no end. My tongue refused to form words. My feet refused to move. All I could hear was the quiet fracture of my heart, splintering piece by piece. She didn't notice me at first. She was wrapped in him, wrapped in the life she had chosen over me. And when our eyes finally met, there was no guilt, no soap, only indifference. And in that single moment, the truth I had ignored for months hit me with full force. She had already chosen him, and I was nothing. I walked out without saying a word. The apartment, our home, felt hollow, even though it was filled with the memories we had built together. I drove through the streets aimlessly, lights blurring past, the city echoing the chaos inside me. Everything I had believed about love, loyalty, trust, felt like a lie I had told myself. Inside me, two things stirred and grew at once, pain sharp and gnawing, and rage, white-hot and relentless. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, the dreams I carried for both of us, the sacrifices I made silently. And now, she had traded it all for comfort, for money, for someone else. For the first time in my life, it wasn't just her I felt slipping away. It was me, my identity, my heart, my entire sense of worth, evaporating in the glow of her betrayal. I asked myself over and over, was I ever enough? Did she ever love me? Or was I just a placeholder until something better came along? Every memory felt poisoned. Every laugh, every promise, every whispered, I love you. Now it all carried the sting of deceit. I had loved with my whole heart, and it had been returned with betrayal. And yet, amid the devastation, a quiet voice refused to be silenced. A stubborn, burning whisper deep inside me. This isn't the end. This is where it begins. The nights that followed were long and unforgiving. I sat alone in our apartment, replaying every smile, every word, every touch. Despair pressed down like a weight I could barely lift. But beneath the heaviness, something else was forming. A spark, fragile at first, but unmistakable. A spark that would not die. A spark that would one day grow into a fire I could no longer contain. And I knew, even then, that the man I was about to become would never be the man she had left behind. The days after her betrayal were darker than anything I had ever known. The city moved on around me, oblivious to the collapse of my world. Cars honked, lights flickered, people laughed, and I felt invisible. I was already gone. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, running every memory through my mind like a broken tape. Her laughter, her touch, the promises we had whispered when no one else was listening. And then the truth settled like a weight I couldn't lift. She had chosen money over me, over us, over everything we had dared to dream together. And the cruelest part? She didn't even seem to notice the destruction she had caused. To her, life went on as if nothing had changed. But inside me, the world had ended. I stopped going to the shop. I didn't answer calls. I avoided friends, family, even myself. Every corner of my life became a reminder of what I had lost. The kitchen where we had laughed over burned toast. The balcony where we had sketched our future in the stars. The small living room where we whispered our dreams into the night. It all felt empty, like I was a ghost walking through the remains of someone else's life, wondering if I had ever truly existed. Night after night, I wandered the streets, lost among strangers, lost even to myself. Rain poured down one evening, soaking me to the bone, and I didn't care. The cold seeped in, and for the first time I welcomed it, because it matched the numbness I felt inside. I imagined confronting her, screaming, pleading, begging for an explanation that would never come. But every vision shattered the same way. She wouldn't feel it. She never would. And that realization, that final, unbearable truth, broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. I asked myself questions I didn't want answers to. Why does life reward the unworthy and punish the loyal? Why does heartbreak fall on those who give everything? And slowly, painfully, I realized my despair wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing my trust in people, losing my belief in love, losing the part of myself that thought life was fair. And yet, beneath all the rubble, a tiny ember refused to die. A voice, quiet and insistent, whispered in my mind, "You will rise. Not for her, not for anyone, but for yourself." That spark, fragile, almost imperceptible, was the first sign of the fire that would later consume me. The fire that would strip away weakness, fear, and illusion, leaving only the man I was meant to become. Weeks passed in a haze of despair. And then one night, I climbed to the roof of my apartment and stared out at the city lights flickering like distant stars. I made a silent promise to myself. I will never be her shadow again. If she chose money over me, then I will choose myself, and I will rise like she never imagined. Little did I know, that promise would mark the beginning of a journey that was long, painful, and ultimately unstoppable. The night I promised myself I would rise stretched longer than any night I had ever known. But this time, it wasn't filled with numbness or despair. There was something different, a subtle tension in my chest, a pulse in my mind, a whisper that told me everything was about to change. It started small. A single thought refused to leave me. If she wants money, I'll give her nothing, but I will give myself everything. And in that moment, I realized the truth I'd been too blind to see. My life hadn't ended. It had only paused. She had walked away, but I still had time. I still had strength. I still had vision. The first step toward rebirth wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about reclaiming myself, the man I had allowed to fade while loving her. I began waking up early again, not because anyone demanded it, but because I demanded it of myself. I dusted off old dreams I had abandoned, old projects I had shelved for her comfort, old ideas that had once made my heart beat faster. And for the first time in months, I felt alive, truly alive. Pain had taught me a brutal, unforgiving truth. Love can break you, betray you, abandon you, but resilience cannot be stolen. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every excuse she whispered to justify herself, I let them fuel me. I decided then that I would not waste my life wishing she had chosen me. Let her have the world she wanted. I would build one of my own, one she could never touch, one that reflected the man I truly was. I reached out to mentors I had once ignored. I reconnected with friends who had believed in me even when she hadn't. I invested my energy not in heartbreak, but in growth. Every day, I learned something new, skills, strategies, discipline. Every day, I laid a brick in the foundation of the empire I was building. Not for her, not for anyone else, for me. I could feel myself changing, becoming a man she would never recognize. But more importantly, becoming a man I would never betray myself by being. One night, sitting at my old desk with pen in hand, I wrote words I had never dared to say aloud. I am done mourning her choices. I am done begging for love I will never receive. From now on, I rise, not for her approval, not for her eyes, but for my own soul. And as the words settled on the page, something inside me shifted. The despair of the past weeks began to dissolve, replaced by clarity, by purpose, by the unmistakable energy of rebirth. The city lights stretched before me, endless and indifferent, but I no longer felt small beneath them. A new man was taking shape, stronger, sharper, unstoppable. The journey from pain to power had begun, and when I returned, I would be more than just a man. I would be a force she could never ignore. The first days of my rebirth were quiet. No dramatic gestures, no announcements to the world. Just me, disciplined, focused, relentless. Pain had sharpened me. Betrayal had hardened me. And now, with every thought clear, I moved like a man who had nothing left to lose except his dignity. I began small. Old contacts I had once dismissed now became allies. Ideas I had tucked away in my youth were dusted off, examined, and set into motion. Every evening, I reviewed goals, plans, and the steps I could take the next day. And slowly, I started noticing what I had missed before, opportunities hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to see them. Money, influence, success, they weren't abstract anymore. They became real, tangible, attainable. Each small win felt like placing a brick in the foundation of a life I was finally building for myself. At first, my anger had been raw, chaotic, a storm threatening to consume everything. But I learned to channel it, to turn that fire into fuel. I realized revenge wasn't about her. It wasn't about hurting her or proving anything to anyone else. It was about becoming the man she never believed I could be. It was about reclaiming my worth, my power, and my identity. I was no longer the man waiting for love or validation. I was the man who made himself unstoppable. Opportunities began to multiply faster than I could have imagined. Clients respected my integrity. Colleagues noticed my dedication. Small wins turned into partnerships, deals, promotions. Doors that had once been closed were now opening. Every achievement, no matter how minor, felt like a quiet message to her memory. I'm still here. I'm stronger than ever. And I don't need you. Late at night, when the office lights dimmed and the world was silent, I allowed myself to think of her. Not with longing, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She had chosen poorly, and the irony was exquisite. She had walked away thinking she was taking the best of me. By now, I was no longer the man who spent sleepless nights drowning in despair. I was a man on a mission. Every move I made, every decision I took, was deliberate, precise, and fueled by the fire she had lit inside me. My small victories had grown into something larger, something undeniable. I started ventures I had once thought impossible. And for the first time, the results exceeded even my expectations. Clients trusted me not just for my skill, but for my integrity. Colleagues who had once laughed at my dreams now sought my advice. Every deal I closed, every project that succeeded, felt like a quiet victory, not against her, but against the version of myself that had once been broken, fragile, and lost. And yet, part of me couldn't help imagining her reaction. The woman who had abandoned me for comfort and wealth. Would she recognize the man I was becoming? Or would she think I had remained the same? It didn't matter, because I was no longer building for her approval. I was building for me. I didn't rise quietly. I rose smart. Every success was carefully amplified, not for bragging, but so that the right people, and inevitably she, would notice. I leveraged contacts she had dismissed, networked in circles she had ignored, and slowly, deliberately, built a reputation she could never overlook. Each achievement reminded me, this wasn't revenge for her. It was redemption for me, a reclamation of everything she had underestimated, my strength, my focus, my unshakable resolve. Late at night, sitting in my office overlooking the city skyline, I let myself breathe. The lights below twinkled like distant stars, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. By now, I was no longer the man who spent sleepless nights drowning in despair. I was a man on a mission. Every move I made, every decision I took, was deliberate, precise, and fueled by the fire she had lit inside me. My small victories had grown into something larger, something undeniable. I started ventures I had once thought impossible. And for the first time, the results exceeded even my expectations. Clients trusted me not just for my skill, but for my integrity. Colleagues who had once laughed at my dreams now sought my advice. Every deal I closed, every project that succeeded, felt like a quiet victory, not against her, but against the version of myself that had once been broken, fragile, and lost. And yet, part of me couldn't help imagining her reaction. The woman who had abandoned me for comfort and wealth. Would she recognize the man I was becoming? Or would she think I had remained the same? It didn't matter, because I was no longer building for her approval. I was building for me. I didn't rise quietly. I rose smart. Every success was carefully amplified, not for bragging, but so that the right people, and inevitably she, would notice. I leveraged contacts she had dismissed, networked in circles she had ignored, and slowly, deliberately, built a reputation she could never overlook. Each achievement reminded me, this wasn't revenge for her. It was redemption for me, a reclamation of everything she had underestimated, my strength, my focus, my unshakable resolve. Late at night, sitting in my office overlooking the city skyline, I let myself breathe. The lights below twinkled like distant stars, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. I realized my rise wasn't about money or power. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about proving that betrayal could fracture trust, but it could never break will. And the irony was exquisite. The very woman who had left me thinking I was nothing was now surrounded by people who envied me, respected me, and, without knowing, were silently witnessing her mistake. I often thought about her during those nights. She left because she couldn't see my worth. But soon she would see what she had lost, and she would be shocked, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I had finally become the man I was always meant to be. That thought, that tiny flicker of satisfaction, was sweeter than anything I had ever felt in her arms. And then, as I closed yet another deal, my phone buzzed. A message from someone in our shared circle. Did you see what Isla just posted? I didn't look immediately. I already knew. She had likely noticed my rise. And deep down, I was ready to let her feel the shock she had never considered. This wasn't the end of my journey. It was only the beginning. And the man I had become would never again be defined by anyone else's choices. By this point, I was no longer the man who cried alone in the dark. I was no longer the man waiting for apologies that would never come. I had become a presence, confident, powerful, untouchable. Every step I took was measured, every move intentional. And deep down, I knew the world she abandoned me for was the same world that would now witness her shock. My business had grown far beyond my old apartment dreams. What started as a single step out of pain had become a climb to power. I had employees who respected my decisions, partners who valued my leadership, and opportunities one once believed were meant for someone else. But now I understood something. I wasn't chasing wealth anymore. I was chasing mastery over my life, my choices, my destiny. Every achievement felt like a quiet declaration. I didn't need her. I never did. But part of me also knew that the day she saw this transformation, she would finally face the truth she had ignored, that she had walked away from a man who was still becoming. And I wasn't done. Not yet. It happened sooner than I expected. A mutual friend hosted a charity event, a gathering neither of us could decline. The moment I walked in, whispers traveled through the room. Not about her, about me. People approached with respect, admiration, and she noticed. Of course she did. When I finally saw her across the room, it felt unreal. She didn't recognize me at first. The man standing there, tall, sharp, composed, was not the man she left behind. Not the man who begged, waited, cried. She froze. Her trained smile wavered. Her eyes flickered with something I had never seen on her face before. Regret. Real, undeniable regret. And for a moment, I simply watched her. Not out of anger, not out of longing, but out of understanding. I had changed. She hadn't. I could have walked up to her. I could have asked why, or demanded answers she never had. I could have thrown every painful night back in her face. But I didn't, because I had already won. Revenge wasn't about shouting or proving her wrong. My greatest victory was my calm, my dignity, my transformation. As she watched me, the man she thought she could replace, I realized something powerful. The most satisfying revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. It's becoming unrecognizable in all the ways she never expected. I didn't need to hurt her. Life had already handed her the truth. She had lost something irreplaceable. My gaze met hers, steady, calm, absolute. Look at me now. Not for you. Not for anyone. For me. I am the life I deserved. I am the man I promised myself I'd become. Her breath hitched. Her eyes softened. And in that quiet second, I saw it. The full weight of her mistake settling on her shoulders. The night ended without drama. No confrontations. No tears. No scenes. Just silence. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had reclaimed my life completely. I didn't walk away to escape her. I walked away because I had outgrown the entire world she lived in. The final chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about rebirth. A peaceful victory, the kind only a man who has been broken, betrayed, and rebuilt can understand. And the best part? She will never forget it. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. The days after that event were surreal. I moved through life with a new rhythm. Calm, composed, unstoppable. The anger that had once consumed me had been replaced by clarity. And the despair that had nearly crushed my spirit now fueled every decision I made. My business continued to flourish. Deals that once seemed impossible were now routine. People sought my counsel, my insights, my vision. I became the man I had always wanted to be. Not for her, not for anyone, but for myself. Everywhere I went, whispers followed. People talked about my rise, my transformation, the quiet power I carried. And somewhere I knew she heard those whispers too. She reached out, cautiously, almost tentatively. I didn't respond immediately. I watched from a distance, observing her attempts to reconnect, her subtle gestures to re-enter my life. But this time, I didn't feel the old longing. I didn't feel the desire to explain, to apologize, to beg. All I felt was calm satisfaction. Her regret wasn't about me. It was about what she had lost. And that loss was mine no longer. I thought about all the nights I spent broken, all the mornings I woke with pain, all the moments I questioned my worth. And now, I understood something profound. The man I became wasn't because of her. It was in spite of her. And that makes him unstoppable. I no longer needed validation, love, or recognition from anyone who had once abandoned me. I had my life. I had my dignity. I had my empire. And that was enough. The final encounter was silent. She watched my life from afar, realizing the enormity of what she had lost. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to prove anything, because the truth was already visible. I had risen. She had faltered, and the balance of our lives had shifted irrevocably. I had finally claimed everything that mattered, not out of revenge, not for pride, not for anyone else, but for the man I always knew I could be, the man who refused to be diminished, the man who refused to settle, the man who had been broken, betrayed, and reborn, stronger, untouchable, unstoppable. And in that quiet, irreversible triumph, I finally understood. Life doesn't reward the heart that waits for others to choose it. Life rewards the heart that chooses itself. I had chosen mine. The empire I had built wasn't just made of wealth or influence. It was built from the pieces of a man who had been broken, betrayed, and left behind. Every late night, every sacrifice, every sleepless hour had been for me. Not for her, not for anyone else. I walked through the office one morning, sunlight spilling across polished floors and humming computers. I paused for a moment and let the stillness settle in. No one shouted my name. No one clapped. And yet, it felt like the world itself was acknowledging my triumph. The calm was intoxicating, because I realized something I hadn't understood during the darkest days. True victory doesn't scream. It whispers. It carries itself in confidence. It lives in peace. I thought about Isla one last time, about the choices she made, the life she pursued, and the regret I knew she carried. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel sadness. I only felt gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had awakened me, for the betrayal that had forced me to see my own strength, and for the man I had become because of it. I knew that no one could take this from me. No heartbreak, no regret, no lost love could diminish what I had built. I smiled quietly, sipping my coffee, watching the city wake beneath me. The man who once begged for love and validation no longer existed. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, unstoppable. And I finally understood the most important truth. In the end, some goodbyes aren't endings. They are blessings in disguise. I left the office, stepping into the streets with a calm certainty. Life stretched ahead of me like an open road, bright, endless in mine. I didn't need her to see it. I didn't need anyone to acknowledge it, because I had already won the only battle that mattered, the one for my own heart, my own dignity, and my own peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free.